What happens when a clueless CEO replaces his best employees with his personal favorite? When I first got that email summoning me to New York City for a meeting with the CEO and the board, I had no idea what was coming. I was a general troubleshooter for the company based out of Ontario, handling both Canadian and US clients. My work took me across borders, often by car since my schedule was unpredictable and flights were too costly. I loved the job, solving problems, meeting clients, fixing what others couldn't. My colleague Jim worked under me, but we operated more like equals. When Jim and I compared notes, we realized we'd both been called to the same meeting. No explanation, just a time and place. We met the night before for dinner and tried to guess what it was about, but nothing made sense. The next morning, we were led into a boardroom where the CEO, Bob, and the directors were already waiting. Bob explained that our department would be split into two, one for Canada, one for the US. A new hire would handle the US clients, while we would stay north of the border. It caught us both off guard. No one had mentioned this before. When I asked who the new hire was, Bob smiled proudly and brought in Karen, a woman who couldn't have been older than 23. She walked in with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. Within minutes, she made it clear she had no interest in learning from us. Bob introduced her as someone who would work alongside us, but her tone said otherwise. "I already have some ideas to streamline operations and cut unnecessary expenses," she announced, glancing at us like we were part of those unnecessary expenses. The confusion in the room was thick. Even some board members looked uncomfortable. I turned to Bob and asked him to clarify her role. He smiled and said, "Karen will be heading your department now. You'll both report directly to her." One of the board members interrupted immediately. "That's not what we discussed. We agreed to divide the department, not replace existing leadership." Karen folded her arms. "Well, I can work with that, as long as they stay out of my way." That was the last straw. Bob ended the meeting abruptly and told us we were no longer to interact with Karen or any US clients. We were to focus solely on Canada. I asked for written confirmation, and sure enough, we got it by email later that day. So, Jim and I did exactly that. We notified all US clients that Karen would be taking over their accounts and provided her contact details. Then we settled into our smaller, quieter workload. Less travel, fewer emergencies. It wasn't bad. But within a week, the complaints started. US clients were calling and emailing, furious that Karen wasn't responding or was missing appointments. I simply forwarded their messages to her and copied Bob and the board. A week later, Karen called me directly, trying to sound friendly, but it was obvious she was drowning. She asked how I'd handle a particular client issue. I reminded her that I'd been told not to interfere. Later that evening, Jim called me. Apparently, Karen had tried the same thing with him. We both stayed out of it. A few weeks later, Bob called me in a panic. He wanted me to resume control of the entire department. I declined politely, reminding him that I didn't want to overstep Karen's authority. For months, the US clients begged for us to come back. That's when it clicked. Jim and I had built strong relationships and a solid reputation. Why not use that? Over lunch one afternoon, I pitched him the idea of starting our own consulting firm. We couldn't offer everything the old company did, but we could deliver quality and reliability. By dessert, he was in. We registered the business, secured our licenses, and within a few weeks, both submitted our resignations. When clients reached out afterward, we told them we had moved on and explained what we could provide. The response was overwhelming. Within a month, we had 60% of our US clients and nearly all of the Canadian ones. 2 months later, we had over 80% of both. Our small operation grew rapidly. A year later, we had 7 new consultants and more work than we could handle. Meanwhile, the old company had to shut down their troubleshooting department entirely. The board fired Bob soon after, and Karen disappeared from the industry. Jim and I now spend more time in the office than on the road. We built something solid, something that actually values experience over favoritism. And to this day, I can't help but think back to that meeting in New York when a CEO tried to restructure a department he didn't even understand. Without realizing it, he handed me the opportunity to build my own.